I am Magnus, and I will be sharing short stories about comics and art. Tomorrow is the birthday of prolific writer, artist, producer and director Kevin Van Hook. What little art I have of his will, however, show up in other episodes. So I will dedicate today's episode of Magnus Collects Magnus to Frank Bolle, one of the old classic artists who would have been 102 today. He has accomplished a lot in his long career, but my interest is mainly in his work for Gold Key, where he, for instance, did Solar and Magnus. Today I concentrate on his art for the unpublished Magnus Robot Fighter issues 47 and 48 from Gold Key. Welcome. These issues were supposed to be part of a Gold Key comeback, for which Dr. Solar's issues 29 to 31 were published, in fact with a Magnus backup, and Turok issues 131 to 134 were prepared together with many other titles. The backup stories in Dr. Solar prepared for these issues. In fact, Dr. Solar 31 ends with a blurb saying Magnus will have his own book. The Magnus backup in Dr. Solar 29 goes back to Magnus's origin. I'm not sure if it was meant to be a reboot or just an added story in the same continuity as previous issues. An obvious difference is that this Magnus has a slightly different uniform, notably with brown boots instead of the famous white boots he used to have. In the backup stories from issues 30 and 31 of Dr. Solar, Magnus seems to be established in a world reminding of all previous issues, including the presence of Lydia and Senator Klein. Funny thing about Senator Klein is that his first name is never mentioned in any published issue, not even these, but in the unpublished Magnus issues he is called Victor. However, in the Valiant issues he was called Jeremiah. Western printing had a long history of creating comics that were distributed through Dell. However, in 1962 they created their own distribution company, Gold Key. Later on they also created the Whitman imprint that had its own distribution methods, for instance multi-packs sold in department stores. First typically 3 comics per pack, later only 2 comics per pack. Whitman variants occur more or less randomly through the publishing history of many Gold Key titles. After Gold Key was no longer distributed to magazine dealers, there was a short period when only Whitman copies were distributed. Technically the company was called KK Publications, but the convention is to use the other names. There were also a few comics sold in toy stores under the name Dynabrite Comics, but not any of Dr. Solar, Turok and Magnus. The characters who since Valiant revived them have been referred to as the Gold Key 3. Of the Gold Key 3, only Turok is old enough to have been published by Dell. Turok was published by Dell from 1956 to 1962. That was issues 3 to 29, as 4-color comics number 596 and 656 count as Turok 1 and 2. Turok was Gold Key from 1962 to 1982, with issues 126 to 130 published only as Whitman issues, and the last 2 of those have 2 different Whitman variants. For collectors it can be interesting to have both the Gold Key and the Whitman versions of comics. However, by 1980 only the Whitman imprint was used, which would have included the planned issues 47 and 48 of Magnus Robot Fighter. They were probably planned for late 1982.
Dr. Solar issues 29 to 31 were Whitman issues, but issue 31 still has two versions, one with a yellow Whitman logo and one with a white logo that was sold in the direct market. Unfortunately, Western gave up between Solar 31 and Magnus Robot Fighter 47. Quite a lot of work was done for several titles, including complete art and printed editor approval copies. Apart from Magnus Robot Fighter 47 and 48 that we see here, I also know about Turok 131 to 134 that have been reprinted and distributed among fans. Frank worked as a comic and comic strip artist for many years and for many publishers, having broken into the industry already in 1943. He was for a long time an illustrator for the magazine Boy's Life from the Boy Scouts of America. He also co-created the Western heroine Black Phantom. As a collector of the Gold Key Free, I remember his work on some early issues of Dr. Solar, but that is just a drop in the ocean of all he has done. While being a modest person, Frank interacted with fans at conventions and for commissions. Together with superfan Joe Petrelak, he created a Dr. Solar set of 4 prints that was made in 31 copies. I finish with a commission by Frank that I got through Joe together with the Magnus pages. Thanks for watching.